Deep Dive Podcast.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the factors that influence cancer development. We've got 5 scientific papers here, and they offer some pretty different perspectives.
Yeah, it's really cool.
One paper goes into like a mathematical model using something called the Erlang distribution to predict cancer, and then others explore the roles of driver genes mutation and the influence of our environment and our lifestyle.
It's so fascinating to see how all these different pieces of the puzzle kind of fit together. It's not just looking at isolated genes or risk factors,
Right.
but how they all interact with each other to paint a more complete picture.
Yeah, for sure. So let's jump right in. The first paper by Belikov caught my eye because it uses like a mathematical approach to understand cancer.
Okay.
Specifically, this thing called the Erlang distribution.
Yeah.
It sounds pretty complicated,
Yeah,
but could you break it down for us a little bit?
absolutely. So the Erlang distribution is all about predicting the probability of a certain number of random events happening within a specific time frame. So imagine you're waiting for like several buses, and each bus is arriving at like unpredictable intervals.
Okay.
The Erlang distribution helps us calculate the likelihood of all of those buses arriving within a certain period.
So how does this apply to cancer? Are our cells waiting for buses?
Not quite, but the principle is similar. Belikov is proposing that cancer development is driven by a series of random events,
Right.
and that the Erlang distribution can be used to model the probability of these events occurring over time.
Wow.
And what's remarkable is that this distribution was originally developed to analyze congestion in telephone exchanges,
Wow.
and it fits the age distribution of incidence for 20 common cancers surprisingly well.
Wow, that's a pretty wild connection. From telephone calls to cancer, who would have guessed?
Belikov's paper suggests that different cancers require a specific number of these events to develop.
Okay.
For example, it takes only 4 events for melanoma, but a staggering 41 for prostate cancer.
And the average time between these events also varies depending on the type of cancer. So some cancers need more of these events than others. It really makes you wonder what these mysterious events could be.
Well, that's where the next paper comes in. It delves into the world of driver genes and mutations,
Okay.
which could hold the key to understanding these events. This one analyzed driver events in over 10,000 cancer patients,
Wow.
and it revealed some surprising insights.
So are these events actually mutations in driver genes? And just to be clear for our listener, can you remind us what driver genes are?
Of course. So driver genes are genes that, when mutated, give cells a growth advantage,
Right.
essentially pushing them towards becoming cancerous.
Okay.
Think of them as the accelerators on a car. When they malfunction, the car speeds out of control.
Gotcha.
And what this study found is that half of all driver events actually involve large-scale changes in chromosomes, not just single gene mutations.
Wow.
So we're not talking about a minor typo in the DNA code, but rather entire sections of chromosomes going awry.
So it's not just about individual genes going rogue,
Right.
but entire portions of chromosomes. It's a much bigger problem, isn't it?
It certainly complicates things, and it might even explain why some cancers require a higher number of events in that Erlang model.
Okay.
Perhaps those cancers involving large chromosome alterations represent multiple hits, but it also begs the question, are all driver genes created equal in their ability to cause cancer?
It's a great question. And it looks like the third paper dives right into that, exploring the concept of driver strength.
Okay.
It seems some mutations have a much stronger impact on cancer development than others.
Right.
What makes a driver gene a strong driver?
So the paper states, driver strength is higher for genes preferentially mutated in patients with few driver mutations overall.
Okay.
Now that's a mouthful, but essentially it means that some genes are so potent that they can initiate cancer with just a few mutations.
Are they saying that some people are simply unlucky if they happen to get a hit in one of these powerful driver genes early on?
That's a thought-provoking question. And it leads us into the next paper, which examines the influence of risk factors and the whole nature versus nurture debate in cancer development. And this one uses a concept called population attributable fractions. Could you explain that?
Sure. Population attributable fractions, or PAFs, help us determine how much certain risk factors contribute to cancer cases overall. It's like figuring out how much flour versus sugar is used in baking a cake.
Okay.
PAFs give us a recipe for cancer risk, where the ingredients are things like smoking or exposure to pollution.
Precisely. And here's where things get really interesting. The research shows that cancers requiring more driver events,
Right.
remember those from the Erlang distribution,
Yeah.
are more strongly linked to what they call anthropogenic risk factors.
Anthropogenic meaning caused by human activity. So the cancers that need more hits to develop
Hmm.
are also the ones most affected by things we do or encounter in our environment.
Exactly. This suggests that our lifestyle and environment play a significant role,
Right.
particularly in cancers that need multiple rolls of the dice to develop.
Okay.
It implies that these types of cancer might be more preventable if we make smarter choices.
That's a pretty powerful concept. So we've gone from a mathematical model
Yeah.
to the identification of driver genes and mutations.
Uh-huh.
And now we're seeing how our environment and lifestyle choices factor into the equation.
Right.
I'm already starting to see how these seemingly disparate pieces of research are starting to connect.
And that's precisely what makes this collection of papers so fascinating.
Yeah.
They're not just individual studies, they're pieces of a much larger puzzle.
Yeah.
And the more pieces we put together, the clearer the picture of cancer development becomes.
This is a lot to digest, and I think our listener could probably use a moment to ponder what we've uncovered so far.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
we're not done yet. We still have one more paper to discuss, and it delves even deeper into the nature versus nurture debate,
Right.
offering unique perspective on why some cancers might be more avoidable than others.
That's right. And it's a fitting conclusion to this deep dive, tying together everything we've discussed so far.
Awesome.
So let's take a breath, and we'll be back to explore those final insights.
Sounds good.
Deep Dive Podcast.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of cancer research. It's incredible how these papers are revealing the complex interplay of factors that contribute to cancer development.
Yeah, I'm still processing all this information. We started with a mathematical model,
Right.
and now we're talking about specific genes and the impact of our environment.
Right.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion, each layer revealing something new and fascinating.
That's a great analogy. And remember, we're just scratching the surface here.
Right.
There's still so much more to uncover.
Yeah.
But each paper we discuss adds another piece to the puzzle, bringing us closer to a comprehensive understanding of cancer.
You mentioned that the last paper delves deeper into the nature versus nurture debate.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get to that, can we revisit those population attributable fractions? I'm still a bit fuzzy on how they help us understand the impact of our environment and lifestyle.
Absolutely. So remember, population attributable fractions, or PFs, tell us how much certain risk factors contribute to cancer cases overall.
Right.
In this study, the researchers analyzed PAFs for a range of cancers in 3 countries: the USA, England, and Australia.
Okay.
They wanted to see which risk factors were the biggest culprits across different populations.
So they were looking for consistent patterns across different countries.
Exactly.
Did they find any?
They did. They were able to identify 2 distinct classes of cancers based on their PAF profiles: anthropogenic and non-anthropogenic. The degree to which human activities influence the development of a particular cancer determines which category it falls into.
Right. Anthropogenic cancers
Right.
are those heavily influenced by things we do, such as smoking or being exposed to certain pollutants. What did they find about these anthropogenic cancers?
The researchers discovered a strong correlation between the number of driver events required for a cancer to develop
Okay.
and the percentage of cases attributable to those modifiable risk factors.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, the more hits a cancer needs to develop, the greater the influence of our choices and environment.
Okay, I think I'm starting to grasp this concept. It's like those cancers that require more rolls of the dice to develop are also the ones where our choices have a bigger impact on whether those dice land in our favor.
That's a fantastic way to visualize it. It highlights the potential we have to influence our own health outcomes. This is where prevention strategies become particularly important.
Absolutely. It's empowering to know that we're not just passive passengers on this journey. But before we delve into those strategies, can we talk about the specific risk factors identified in the study?
Certainly. The study highlighted several key risk factors, some of which might surprise you. Smoking, as you might expect, was a major contributor, particularly for lung cancer.
Right.
But diet also played a significant role, with a high intake of red and processed meat being linked to an increased risk of colorectal cancer.
So those barbecue weekends might need a second thought.
Indeed. And don't forget about the impact of obesity, alcohol consumption, and exposure to environmental pollutants. These all factor into the equation as well. It's not about eliminating every single risk, but rather being mindful of the choices we make and the cumulative effect they can have on our health.
That makes sense. It's
Yep.
like we're creating a recipe for our health, and every ingredient we choose, whether it's a healthy meal or exposure to pollution, contributes to the final outcome.
Precisely. It's about making conscious choices that support our overall well-being. Now, with that understanding of anthropogenic cancers and their risk factors, let's transition to the final paper and see what it reveals about those non-anthropogenic cancers, the ones that seem less influenced by human activity.
Okay, this should be interesting. You mentioned earlier that our bodies have evolved defenses against ancient cancer risks like UV radiation and viruses.
Right.
Does this paper elaborate on those defenses?
It certainly does. For example, our skin cells divide very slowly, minimizing the chance of UV damage transforming into mutations.
Okay.
And our immune system is constantly on patrol, searching for and eliminating cancer-causing viruses before they can cause too much harm.
It's amazing to think about the intricate systems our bodies have developed over millennia to protect us from these threats.
Mm.
So we're not entirely defenseless against non-anthropogenic cancers.
Exactly. But this evolutionary perspective also helps us understand why those anthropogenic cancers pose a more significant challenge.
Because our bodies haven't had the time to adapt to those newer human-made threats. It's like we're playing catch-up with these modern-day cancer-causing agents.
That's a great way to put it. Our cells haven't had the luxury of millions of years to evolve defenses against things like cigarette smoke or industrial pollutants.
So it's crucial to reduce our exposure to these anthropogenic risks.
Mm.
Does this paper offer any specific recommendations for doing so?
Well, it emphasizes the importance of taking a multi-pronged approach. It's not just about individual choices,
Right.
but also about advocating for policies and regulations that protect public health.
So it's a collective effort involving individuals, communities, and governments.
Absolutely. It's about creating environments that support healthy living and minimize our exposure to harmful pollutants. It's about clean air and water-safe workplaces and access to affordable, nutritious food.
This is really inspiring. It seems like we're shifting from a sense of helplessness to one of empowerment. We're starting to see that we can make a difference in the fight against cancer.
That's the key takeaway here. By understanding the intricate web of factors that contribute to cancer development, we can make more informed choices and advocate for change. We're not powerless in the face of this disease.
This has been an incredible deep dive so far. We've explored the mathematical probabilities of cancer, delved into the fascinating world of genes and mutations, and uncovered the powerful influence of our environment and lifestyle. And now we're starting to see how we can use this knowledge to take control of our health. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've learned. We'll be back soon for the final leg of our journey.
Deep Dive Podcast.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It feels like we've been on this incredible journey, exploring the complexities of cancer development. From mathematical models to driver genes and the impact of our environment, has been a whirlwind of information.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground, but it's all connected. Each piece of research we've discussed builds upon the last, leading us to a more nuanced understanding of this multifaceted disease.
Yeah, one of the most thought-provoking concepts we've discussed is this idea that cancers driven by multiple driver mutations might be more susceptible to those anthropogenic factors, the things we do in the environments we inhabit. It makes me wonder if we've been focusing too much on targeting individual genes and mutations
Yeah.
when maybe we should be prioritizing prevention strategies aimed at reducing exposure to these environmental and lifestyle risks.
That's a really insightful observation, and it's a question that researchers are actively exploring.
Yeah.
If we can confirm that these cancers, the ones that require more hits to develop, are indeed more reliant on modifiable risk factors, it opens up exciting possibilities for prevention.
So instead of trying to hit a moving target by developing therapies for specific genetic mutations, which can be incredibly challenging, we could shift our focus to creating environments and promoting behaviors that minimize those hits in the first place.
Precisely. It suggests that we might have more control over our cancer destiny than we previously thought. Of course, more research is needed to validate this hypothesis and pinpoint the most impactful risk factors for each type of cancer, but it's a promising avenue for prevention.
It sounds like we're talking about a paradigm shift in how we approach cancer.
Yeah.
Moving away from a reactive approach of treating the disease after it develops to a more proactive approach focused on preventing it in the first place.
That's a great way to put it. It's about recognizing that cancer prevention is not just the responsibility of scientists and doctors. It's a collective effort that requires individuals, communities, and governments to work together.
So what are some practical steps our listeners can take to reduce their risk of developing cancer? What advice would you give them based on the research we've discussed?
Based on the evidence presented in these papers, some of the most important things are to quit smoking, maintain a healthy weight, eat a balanced diet rich in fruits and vegetables, limit your alcohol consumption, and protect yourself from excessive sun exposure.
This deep dive has been incredibly enlightening. It feels like we've gained a much deeper understanding of the complex factors that contribute to cancer development. And more importantly, it's left me feeling empowered to take action, both in my own life and in advocating for a healthier world.
And that's what it's all about. By embracing knowledge and taking proactive steps, we can all play a role in reducing the burden of cancer. Remember, the conversation doesn't end here. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep into the world of science and knowledge.
Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. We hope you've learned something new and feel inspired to take charge of your health. And remember, every small step you take towards a healthier lifestyle contributes to a larger movement towards a healthier future for all of us.
Deep Dive Podcast.